Peter, what do you make of this poll? 15,000 people, that's a lot more than polls usually have. They usually sample, you know far better than I do, just over 1,000 people. But 15,000 people for this poll, I mean, does that make it a lot more accurate, do you think?
Hello, Peter. 15,000 is a large sample for a conventional poll, but for this kind of exercise called MRP, where they try and use figures to predict individual seats, it's not nearly big enough, in my view. That to do MRP properly, you need 40 or 50,000. Look, I don't know what's going to happen in the election. At this stage, it's perfectly possible the Tories will be virtually wiped out. It's possible they'll recover to some extent. I'd be surprised if they stay in office after the election, but I think there's a whole range of possibilities. So the Sunday Times story on this Survation poll is at one end of the range of possible outcomes. But I have to say, Peter, I think this particular poll is quite badly flawed. It's a fairly technical set of points. But let me just make one thing. I've been looking at the figures in some detail, and what they predict is that in the Conservative vote, where they're strongest, will go down a lot. The Labour vote, where they're strongest, will go down. The Lib Dem vote, where they're strongest, will go down. And they're saying that all three parties, where they're weakest, their vote will go up. I find that deeply implausible. No election has ever produced anything like that. I think there are real technical difficulties and technical issues with this poll.
So we should be sceptical, Peter?
I'd be very sceptical about this. And to say that Rishi Sunak might lose his seat, well, it makes a great headline, and, you know, it is conceivably possible. But this poll, I don't think, makes that case. You know, just as a stopped clock is right twice a day, the worst poll might end up being right. And I'm not saying this is the worst poll, but I frankly wouldn't rely on it for these individual constituency predictions, which I think, as I say, are very badly flawed, in my view.
Do you agree with what Professor Sir John Curtis said this week, that he believes that there is a 99% chance of a Labour government?
Yes, and I thought that before this Survation poll came out, and I think it's. I think it now, and one can go into the reasons, you know, the technical as well as political reasons. But I think the Conservatives are so far behind. I think the country has made up its mind that it doesn't want the Conservatives to carry on. I see no real prospect of Rishi Sunak being Prime Minister, you know, a week or 2 weeks after the election. Whether there will be a clear Labour majority, whether there will be a big Labour majority, I think that's still very open.
You've outlined your reservations about the methodology and the numbers of people involved in this poll, and you've done that very, very clearly for us, Peter, and I appreciate that. If it were to be the case that the Conservatives got, let's say for the sake of argument, under 150 seats, it would be interesting because Labour would have a huge majority, far bigger than 1997. In regard to democracy itself, do you think it's healthy for there to be a very small opposition? Surely we want a robust opposition.
I'd agree with that, although I would say that the quality of the opposition benches is rather more important than the quantity of MPs on the opposition benches. You know, when opposition shadow cabinet, opposition leader get up in the House of Commons to hold the government to account, they need to have good, strong arguments. Just to say, I've got 200 behind me, or 150 or 250, makes a bit of difference, but not much. I'm much more worried personally about what the quality of a post-Sunak, much diminished Conservative Party will be like, as well as the numbers.
Okay, Peter, it's interesting as well in regard to the fact that we will see a lot of change politically. I wonder how Labour will be looking at this necessarily, because the Labour people I speak to are certainly saying, well, actually, if you look at the swing that is needed, if you look at 1997, it was, I think, 12.8 to get that majority, and to get even a majority of 2, you need 12.6% swing. I know we're getting into the technical stuff, but you know it better than anybody, Peter. Yeah. It is a big ask for Labour even to get a small majority.
Yeah, and I think Labour will be not very happy about these polls. I mean, it sounds perverse. You think a poll showing Labour, a Labour landslide, they'd all be delighted. I remember, I know, 2 or 3 weeks before the 97 election, I was at an event, and there was Tony Blair, who I know fairly well, and I got a figure for the next morning's opinion poll showing Labour, whatever it was, 25-28% ahead. And I thought he'd be pleased to hear that. And he wasn't, because his view was, as if the public think Labour's going to win that easily, a lot of Labour supporters might not bother to vote. So to some extent, Labour wants to be well ahead, but they don't want all the voters to think that Labour...
There has to be some element of jeopardy to get people out to vote, don't you? Especially when you have Conservative voters who are often very, very good at coming out and getting the vote out. Is historically the Conservatives have been pretty good at that.
That's right.
Okay, Peter Kelner, thank you very, very much indeed. Peter is a former president of YouGov.